Eyewitness News. Elvis Presley, king of popular music, is dead at the age of 42.
The undisputed king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, is dead. He died this afternoon here in his adopted hometown of Memphis after apparently collapsing at his South Memphis mansion. And the mayor has ordered all flags in the city to be flown at half-staff.
This is Channel 7's Eyewitness News. Tonight with Fahey Flynn, Joel Daly, Bill Frink, Steve Edwards, and a special report by Jay Levine.
Elvis Presley is dead at 42, possibly of a heart attack, an autopsy reveals tonight. Memphis, Tennessee is in mourning. Tonight, thousands of fans are reported gathered around his palatial mansion. The Memphis Telephone Company reports total overtaxing of its lines.
Pandemonium has broken out here on Elvis Presley Boulevard in Memphis. Thousands of fans from all over the country are converging on Graceland, trying to get in to view the body of the 42-year-old king of rock and roll.
Why go to all this trouble?
Because we love Elvis. We still do.
You're not going to get in, you know.
Doesn't make any difference. There's nobody else like him. There won't ever be anybody else like him as far as I'm concerned. I just can't believe he's dead. It's terrible.
Presley's show business friends, as well as his legions of fans, are mourning tonight. Sammy Davis Jr. was asked how the performer would rate on a scale of 1 to 10.
Well, he's got to be 11, babe. And I'm not saying that because of the tragedy of the moment, but because anybody in this business of ours that can become one of a kind. He's the one, the only, the original. Everybody else is an imitator. It came after him.
Welcome to Talk with History. I'm your host, Scott, here with my wife and historian, Jen.
Hello.
On this podcast, we give you insights to our history-inspired world travels, YouTube channel journey, and examine history through deeper conversations with the curious, the explorers, and the history lovers out there.
Don't have to twist my arm. You know that I'm satisfied. Ain't gotta twist my arm.
All right, Jen, we have had an incredibly busy October. Part of it's just because my job has been 100 miles an hour for the past, basically the entire month. I've been working weekends and doing all that stuff. So we republished an old episode last week, which is really cool. It was fun to talk a little Halloween theme, Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah, I think that episode doesn't get as much love as it should because it's so cool.
Well, and it was our original, it was like our 7th episode ever. And actually, I listened back to it, it's pretty good. So if you're Night of the Living Dead fan or you're a zombie genre movie fan, you can go listen to that. I want to thank a couple people first because we've had some kind of stuff happening. We've potentially got a live stream coming up. So if you're listening to this after it's released, we're going to try to live stream on Wednesday. If you're listening to this sometime in the future, we're going to try to get some more live streams back. We used to do them quite a bit. But first, I want to thank Larry Z. So he dropped us basically like kind of like a one-time tip over at talkwithhistory.com. There's a support link in the bottom. And I think he's been listening to like our entire back catalog of podcasts, and he dropped us a $25 tip. So we really appreciate that, Larry. He said, caught up with every podcast, discovered after learning about them through pinups for vets when Jim became an ambassador. World War II content is my favorite. And I think he's been commenting on some of our podcast episodes because in Spotify, you can actually drop comments now. So if you're a Spotify listener, please feel free to drop us a comment or let us know what you're learning or if you have a question or anything like that. So we really appreciate that kind of support. If you want to support the podcast, you can always go to talkwithhistory.com. There's a support link at the bottom. Or if you want some kind of extra content that we're going to slowly release and work on over at the History Road Trip, our newsletter website, you can sign up for a membership or even do just like a 1 month type thing. So it's monthly or annually. And that support really does help the podcast. We haven't really had any partnerships or sponsorships on the podcast, although we have some potential ones coming up here. We'll see. And we love hearing from listeners and from our audience. Like it's closing that circle, that kind of content circle and having folks email us or reach out to us and say, hey, thank you for this episode or that episode, or I love this kind of content. We really do love that.
We do really appreciate your feedback. For us, it's just a labor of love, and sometimes we don't get to hear what you guys think. And when you give us such positive reinforcement, really it inspires us and keeps us going. So thank you so much.
Yeah. So again, if you want to drop us a one-time tip, buy us some coffee or a couple coffees, you can do that over at talkwithhistory.com. Or if you want to sign up for our newsletter, where we're going to start generating some exclusive content over there, in addition to the free newsletter, you can see that over at thehistoryroadtrip.com. All right, Jen. So we are talking about the king.
The king.
So the king, his big tagline was taking care of business. So let's take care of business and talk about his original gravesite here in Memphis that a lot of people don't know about.
Absolutely. So we are now Memphis residents again, and there is none more influential in this town than Elvis Presley. Now, Elvis Presley wasn't born here. He was born in Mississippi, but he moves here as a child, goes to high school here, and even after he becomes famous, he will forever have his home here. So when he passes at such a young age, so unexpectedly at 42 years old, August 16th, 1977, there isn't much in the way of preparations for his death. So nothing has really been planned on what to do with Elvis. No one planned for him to pass away at 42 years old. The only thing that was like a precursor to where they were going to put Elvis, where were they going to put him as far as the cemetery is concerned, is his mother had passed. And she had died August 14th, 1958. And it's significant if you're an Elvis fan because he was in the Army at the time and he gets emergency family leave to come home. He gets home August 12th and he's able to spend 2 days with his mother, Gladys, before she passes from heart failure. And then 2 days after that, she is buried at Forest Hill Cemetery, which is one of the older original cemeteries of Memphis, Tennessee. It's a pretty elaborate funeral because 900 people come to the funeral, but most of them to see Elvis Presley. He gets an extension of his emergency leave from the Army for another 5 days. He doesn't report back until August 24th, 1958. But there's also a picture of him at her original gravesite with all the flowers.
Yep.
And when you look at our videos, like if you've watched our shorts from Graceland, and if you've ever been to the Graceland, to the meditation garden, which is now the forever home of Elvis and his family, there is a big white cross there that says Presley on it. And that's the original monument marker for Gladys in the Forest Hill Cemetery.
And we show a picture of the original location, original picture of that cross at her original gravesite.
Yes. And so we visit that in the video because there is still a concrete slab for where that cross was placed. And unbeknownst to us, when we went to make the video, someone had actually left a wreath there, like a funeral wreath.
There was a ribbon, it said Gladys on it.
Yes. And they have marked out a square where her grave was because some people think she's still there. So we wanted to just emphasize the reason why Forest Hill Cemetery was picked so quickly after Elvis's passing is because his mother was there.
And he had other family.
And he had other family there, which we also show. So we show Aunt, who hadn't passed at the time, but his uncle was there, and his cousin, very close to Gladys's grave. So other funerals that Elvis would have attended, and he visited his mother very regularly in Memphis. So when he passes so quickly in 1977, they just default to this place that Elvis has his mother at. Now they disinter her. They dig up her grave and they put her in a mausoleum. There is a mausoleum there that was built in 1915 for the elite of Memphis. Now, in 1958, was Elvis an elite of Memphis? Could his mother have been put there? Probably. His stardom was rising. He wasn't quite the star he is today, or was when he hits his stardom, but his star was rising. He had some moderate fame, and they had purchased Graceland. But I don't think their mindset was there yet, where they're going to be such an elite family and people are going to visit this family and want to be so connected to Elvis Presley that they just they buried her where her family was buried.
Yeah, they didn't think that would be a future at the time, right, in 58, that this would be a future thing they would have to consider.
Yes, and so I don't even think they considered putting Gladys in the mausoleum, even though it was available then, because they just didn't see themselves as that part of society yet. Now, in 1977, I make it very clear, Elvis Presley is probably one of, if not the richest person in the Memphis city.
Oh, yeah. The footage from the day of his funeral procession was bonkers.
Yes.
I mean, we've had people commenting on our video saying, I remember my parents driving me down to Graceland to see his funeral.
Yeah. So people lined up to view Elvis in state. They had an open casket in the music room. So if you've ever been to Graceland, it's the room with the piano, the very first room you come to the right. And they had him laying in state in there. And even Lisa Marie remembers so many people coming to see her father, right? And she had alone time with him at night when nobody was there. But so many people came in to view the body of the king. And he's laid out in this 800-pound copper lined casket, which is a exact replica of the same casket his mother is in. So she's also in an 800-pound copper lined casket. And so, yeah, for 2 days. So he passes on August 16th. For 2 days, he lays in state, and all these people come through Graceland to view his coffin and to mourn.
Yeah, and there's news footage of like women passing out and men, like waking people up who like are just visibly distraught, and like there's emotion there. It's I've never seen anything else really like it.
Well, he meant so much to people because I always say Elvis Presley is a great example of the quintessential American dream, because a man who comes from nothing, a boy who's born into poverty and in a rural Mississippi, and is able to become everything, a movie star, the king of rock and roll, an influence on music, an influence on movies, an influence on media. Like the mark he leaves behind is so untouchable. People even today are influenced by Elvis Presley's Sun Studio. You have famous people who will come to record albums in Sun Studio. Why? Because Elvis Presley recorded an album in Sun Studio. So he meant so much to people, and since he died so young and so unexpectedly, people wanted to come and say thank you for what you did in my life. And I feel like a lot of people grew up with him from the time he does like Love Me Tender and goes into the army, and then you see him like Jailhouse Rock and all these other movies. You see him grow up, and then he had to do his residency in Vegas. Like, you see this man from his 20s to his 40s. You've grown up with him for 20 years.
Yeah. Well, and when did he do all like the comeback special stuff? Was that late
68? Yeah.
Yeah. So it wasn't that long, that far long ago, right? In his late 30s. So the comeback special had happened. He had come back onto the scene, right? And less than 7 or 8 years later, all of a sudden he passes at 42. Like it's in that aspect of it. It's that quintessential, superstar that dies young.
Yeah, you can almost like a James Dean
or a Marilyn Monroe or things like that just really cements that stardom, because that's it. It's the snapshot in time. That's the last thing that everybody remembers, is like when they're almost at their peak and they're forever in that status.
Yeah, he grew to legend. Just like you get James Dean, Marilyn Monroe, they'll never age. They grow on into legend. They become bigger than really they ever were in life.
Yep.
And so the mausoleum being reserved for the elite of Memphis, they put his body there. Now, it wasn't permanent yet, right? Because when you're in the mausoleum, there's markers that have been permanently etched and made, and he's just put in a room off to the right. His mother's been disinterred. She's been placed in that room, and he's placed on top of her in that room. So we show you see the video of like 12, 15 men carrying the coffin in. There is a little makeshift chapel. When you walk in that front door, they do a family ceremony there. Now, they do this all August 18th, about 3:30 p.m. Only close family members can be at that makeshift event because it's very small. You only see like 4 pews per side. So it's really like close family and close friends. And then he is placed in that room off to the right.
Yeah, and you can't always get into the mausoleum. Like the front door is often locked.
It is.
But the day we went there when we were filming, it was actually completely locked.
So it's usually always locked on Sundays.
Always locked on Sundays, and we didn't realize that. And so we were like, oh, man. So you actually had to come back a couple days later. The back door was still locked, but you were able to go up to the front office and you said they were very nice about it and had someone unlock it for you so you could get in and visit his previous kind of graves.
His original resting place. So it's now, 1616 Elvis Presley Boulevard. It's the Forest Hill Cemetery. Again, it was established in 1888, but then chartered in 1892. And there is some other famous graves there as well. And we mentioned them in the video, but the founder of Holiday Inn is there. Some people who played backup with Elvis and his original records are there.
I didn't know that.
One of the co-founders of Stax is there. And so there's the Memphis Belle. That's what brought us there in the first place. We were there visiting the Memphis Belle grave.
Margaret Polk.
Margaret Polk is there. So it is a famous Memphis graveyard. There's two of them, and this is the second one. So we were able to get into the mausoleum, see the original resting place of Elvis. People have been signing the marble beside it, and that's why they lock it up now, because it's defacing to the marble. But people have done that to the gate of Graceland.
Yeah, if you see the Graceland, the wall outside of Graceland, I mean, it is covered for like multiple feet, probably 10, 20, 30 feet of people signing. Yeah, and that's more stone.
Yeah, and they've accepted that, but in the mausoleum, they're trying to avoid that. So we left a flag for Elvis's military service, but he's not there for long because unfortunately, August 29th, 3 men were arrested trying to break into the mausoleum. And they're not quite sure what they were going to do because, like I said, it's an 800-pound coffin and it takes 10 to 12 men to lift it. Some think that they were going to try to steal his body and hold it for ransom, but no one knows for sure because they didn't get inside.
Yeah, and we actually had a commenter on the video who said someone had done that to like Charlie Chaplin's body or something like that.
Oh, wow.
And so they had basically taken his body, held it for ransom, and I think they were actually caught. But it's not unprecedented.
Sure. And I mean, I guess it's a get-rich-quick scheme.
Yeah.
But what happens is about, I'd say a week later on September 7th, a letter is sent to the officials of Memphis from the Presley family. Now, remember, Vernon is still alive, Elvis's father, asking if they can move Elvis's body and Gladys's body to Graceland. If they can, they'll put them in the meditation garden, they'll bury them in the ground, and they can provide security at Graceland since they already do that. If they would have to provide security at the mausoleum, it would be $200 a day. Not that Elvis couldn't afford that, but Vernon felt since they already do it at Graceland, this would be better for him to just be home.
Yeah, and that was in the 70s.
That was in the 70s. But this was not done. That's why they had to send a letter. And nowadays people just think of Elvis at Graceland, but this is not the norm even then. It took about a month, but it was approved. And then October 2nd, 1977 is when Elvis's body is actually moved to Graceland with his mother. So it's about a month and a half after he passes is he's actually brought back to Graceland. And since then, Vernon has passed. He is there. His grandmother has passed. She is there. Lisa Marie, unfortunately, untimely again, passes. She's there. And so is Elvis's grandson, Ben. Lisa Marie's son is there as well. And it has become the gravesite of the Presley family. I would venture that Priscilla will be there and Riley will be there. Now, the cross that was at Gladys's grave has been moved there, and all of the other items. There was a headstone; those have been moved there as well. So, if you visit the meditation garden that has become the gravesite of the Presley family, all those items from Forest Hill Cemetery are now there as well.
Yeah, it was neat. It's always neat to go to these cemeteries, right? The more often that you and I do things like this, it's just neat to see what else is there. And actually, funny enough, I will put a link to exactly where Gladys's gravesite is, because the one that's marked already in Google Maps is wrong. So we were looking at that, and we found the correct site, because you can see from the pictures, and there's like another little mini mausoleum for some other family that was buried near Gladys's site. And so we found the exact right spot. And I was looking on Google Maps. I was like, hey, the marker for Gladys's burial site is actually in the wrong spot. So if you use Google Maps, the one that's in there, that's actually wrong from what we saw. This is November of 2024. But I'll leave a link to the exact spot in the podcast show notes to her site.
Yes, and it is in the wrong location, although you can see the right location from that wrong location, and even from the original location, the right location of where Gladys was originally buried, you can see the mausoleum, the expensive mausoleum. That is the only large mausoleum of Forest Hill. So if you're driving in looking for the mausoleum, it is the only large mausoleum.
Yeah, and there's signs on the outside of the mausoleum that says Elvis Presley, like original site or something like that.
Yeah, and so they've embraced their story. I mean, this is footprints of Elvis's early resting place, and this reveals like layers of his significance in Memphis, layers of who he was in life and then who he becomes in death as well. I think this is a very significant visiting location if you are a true Elvis fan. Even when we visited, and it's on the video, they have a picture of Elvis inside that original place. No one else has been put in there. I don't think they will ever use it. I think it'll always have a home as Elvis's original resting place. They have a little monument outside to him about that. There's pictures inside the sanctuary, that little makeshift sanctuary of him and his mother, and what the funeral procession looked like the day Elvis died. So I think they've embraced their story, much like the city of Memphis embraces him as the original son of Memphis. I think the mausoleum has embraced their part in the Elvis Presley story as well.
Yeah, it was fun to make. It's always good to get out there. And if you live in the Memphis area, or if you're here in Graceland, it's not hard to visit. So thank you again for supporting us. If you want to support the podcast, you can do so over at talkwithhistory.com, or if you want to support it and get some extra content that we're going to be making, we potentially have another History After Dark episode that we've been tossing around about some kind of famous historic celebrities in their, I'll say, their night lives. I'll put it that way, and kind of some of the things that come from that. So we're gonna talk a little bit about that over at History After Dark.
We'll talk about History After Dark. If you're interested, the sowing of the oats of celebrity, we'll talk about that.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody.
It's 6:29. This is WMAQ Chicago. I'm Dennis Day with Rick Elliott and Jay Marks. Say it one more time, as much as it hurts. Elvis Presley died today.
There are many superlatives linked with his name, the greatest and the king. But probably the most important thing is that each person listening, and all of us here, that Elvis had an important effect on each one of our lives. And what more can you say about an individual? He'll be remembered for many, many years.
This has been a Walk with History production. Talk with History is created and hosted by me, Scott Benny. Episode researched by Jennifer Benny. Check out the show notes for links and references mentioned in this episode. Talk with History is supported by our fans at thehistoryroadtrip.com. Our eternal thanks to those providing funding to help keep us going. Thank you to Doug McLiverty, Larry Myers, and Patrick Benny. Make sure you hit that follow button in your podcast player, and we'll talk to you next time.
Keep me